Welcome to We Are Soccer. My name is Brooks Lambier, and today we have an awesome guest. We have Rich Nasiff from Sprocket Sports, but also a former assistant coach at University of Albany, as well as Northwestern University. Played at Northwestern University, has coached some great players, and has played with a lot of great players. Rich, how you doing today?
Brooks, Happy New Year. Great to see you again.
Yeah, Happy New Year, man. It's been a little while since the Expo and Michigan, but yeah, it's good to always catch up with you, man. Um, So let's jump in. We're going to talk a little bit about recruiting and player identification. We're going to go through all levels. We'll go through, youth level in terms of like MLS academies recruiting players. We'll talk about that aspect. We'll jump into the college game. As many people know, I've done the scouting on the youth side and on the collegiate and college scouting. I've also done lower division pro scouting. So Rich and I are pretty, between what we do and how many players he's pushed onto the pro game, we're pretty well versed in all these levels and kind of ins and outs and all the different stuff that happens with all this stuff. So let's start with MLS Academy stuff. So MLS Academy is a very interesting one. Every MLS Academy, most now have 15, 15, 17. They've reduced it as the 15s play up a year with the 16s and the 17s
Yeah,
play up a year with the 18s. And then obviously the best players then go into play in the second team.
of course.
But there
Yeah.
there are some clubs that still have 13, 14, they still have all the age groups because they want to start as young as they can and they want to bring them through the system. And they want to push them into the second team and develop them and get them into the first team at some point. So the part I find interesting, very interesting is, and I know you have kids yourself that play sports. Um, I always find it very interesting how at like as we get on, we keep going this year after year, the parents and kids at U11, 12 are like, here's my chance at 13. Like I got to do this. Like I got to leave early. And, it's a really interesting aspect to it because I don't know if they're emotionally mature to like leave mom and dad or to make this huge financial decision, honestly, because it is a big, huge financial
Yeah.
decision if there's not a club close to you. But just kind of from your perspective, do you see it as like just kind of crazy that you want to leave at 13 to go for an MLS Academy at the age of 13?
I think one of the first stories I remember is a player I coached at Soccer's FC. His younger
Mhm.
brother was moving to Philadelphia to live with one of his college teammates' families so he could be part of the union. And you're like, oh,
Mhm.
this is really happening now
Mhm.
here in the US. This was about 8 to 10 years ago. And, I think at the time we had thought about maybe basketball where you'd go to a boarding school to be at an Oak Hill or whatever it is.
Yep.
It is getting to that level. I think what's very interesting is we have to remember that MLS clubs are still very much in their adolescence, if you will.
Mhm.
You think about what we hear with the Ajax Academy or the clubs in England or the Spanish clubs, et cetera, the ones that have been doing it a long time in terms of player development. Um, MLS is still only less than 30 years old. So
Yeah.
they're still trying to figure it out. And the academies are much younger in that sense because they
Yep.
really haven't been around for more than 15, 20 years. And I think each of them are really trying to navigate their demographics, right?
Mhm.
Portland or Columbus or New England are way different than a talent rich New York City FC or
Yep.
New York Red Bull,
Yep.
right? Dallas and Union are different than maybe Kansas City, where there's a huge residency program. I think
Mhm.
each of them are finding their way. And
Mhm.
I think you're what you're finding in the really dense markets. I'll use New York City for an example, just because I work with a lot of clubs who are in the shadows of NYCFC and Red Bull.
Mhm.
Is a
Yep.
lot of those youth clubs are saying, all right, we may compete in MLS Next, we may compete in ECNL, we might be right there with these clubs,
Yep.
but we still want to have a say when we have players who are good enough to go.
Yep.
And we want to have a say not just so that the academies come in and take our players, but so that we can also really inform the parents and the family as to what this option is. I spoke about this a little bit with Lewis Robinson, who's another client of ours at Sprocket, and they've had a long relationship with the crew. And he's like, whenever you have players going to the crew, you have other players who are thinking, well, I'm on that guy's team
Yeah.
and I'm just as good. And
Yeah.
so I think there's just a level of control is not the right word, but just almost a seat to say, hey, here's why this opportunity is there for you, and
Mhm.
here's what you need to consider. And I think you touched on it, Brooks, in the question. At the end of the day, I think with all of this, we have to remember development is not for a period in time 6 months down the road. It's
Correct.
a long-term project. So yes, the ultimate goal may be to end up in MLS.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean an MLS academy is the answer at 13.
Correct.
Some of the best players in MLS right now, especially the domestic ones, weren't even of that level until junior year of college. I think of
Correct.
Duncan McGuire.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece is like we can pretend like there's a science and there's a repeatability to player development where you just send a bunch of kids to an academy and it'll happen.
Yeah.
And I think we all know the statistics on how that is.
Yeah.
I do think what's important for families, if I'm speaking to the parents and the kids,
Yeah.
it's like, are you in an environment that's giving you the highest standard? I don't mean of coaching or of competition. I mean, are you around players on a regular basis where you can see
Yeah.
what that top tier is?
Yep.
And if you are, that's a place you want to be. That doesn't mean you have to go to an MLS academy, but I think as long as you have that, you have a chance to get there. And I mean, last thing I'll say is the picture of my wife behind me. She didn't pick up a lacrosse stick till she was 15. She won 3 national championships. She was a 4-year starter on a program that won, I think, 7 and 8 years. So just a further point to development, it is a very, very different route for everybody. And I think it's just important to make sure that kids are always in a place where they have comfort that they can push themselves, but they are being challenged to step outside their comfort zone. And that balance is a hard one to find for everybody.
It is. It is. I mean, listen, going back to the 13 stuff, like, leaving at 13 to go play for a 13 or 14 academy. I mean, for me, I've heard different stories. Relationships get burnt. The bridges get burnt because of someone that was there in the past. You got to repair them with the local clubs. It's a rough game because there's ins and outs and there's a lot of movement in this stuff. No one stays. A new head coach comes in for the first team. He wants other guys in. You know what I mean? Like when you're in the pro game, there's always a lot of movement and it's never stationary. Like it's not like in the youth game, it's more likely you'll see someone there for 5, 6, 7 years before they move on to something else. But you know, you don't see someone usually sit for 20 years in one position in the pro game and then, they retire. They usually want
Yeah.
some upward movement or whatever. So for me, I would just like to see more of the MLS clubs not take advantage of the local ones and mend those relationships. And if you build more within your local community, you don't have to go then looking across the country or in other states to build out your 13 and 14 teams. If you let the local kids play in the 13 and 14 level, then you're like, okay, these are the positions we need. Let's go grab them at 15 or 16. Then that makes sense. But I understand where you're coming from is if the standard's not high enough with the players you're around that want to get better and want to be pro players. I get it. You need to leave to get into an environment like that where everyone has the same mindset. But that's my next question is, everyone wants the best standard and everything, but the reality is like you said, we're still very young in this. We're still very new in this, development academy stuff. MLS is only 30 years old. I don't see, obviously from watching the college game and you watch the domestics versus the internationals, you just see kind of the hunger and just the professionalism they carry around. I think that still has a lot of work to get into kids at a young age. So then they carry that, work ethic and mindset from, 8 into then as you get older,
Yeah.
into that. That's the issue I see too, is just the maturity and the willingness to want to be a pro and to do what's necessary to be a pro. And unfortunately, with the pay to play system in our country, and how political things can get, sometimes the best players, aren't always playing on a club sometimes, or not all the best players are identified because politics are involved. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a good point here, Brooks, and especially in the last 6 years at U Albany, we worked with a lot of internationals. We brought a lot of players over from pro academies in Europe and
Yeah.
South America.
Yeah.
Um, there is truth in the sense, and you were touching on this in our last element of this conversation of
Mhm.
simply they're a bit more mature at 18 and 19. And
Yep.
so you look back on society, you look back on parenting, and again, I'm painting with broad brushes here because I'm talking to the average of what I've experienced.
Yep.
The reality is, I think that we need to find a way in the American setup from 12 to 18 to
Hmm.
remove the parent in terms of how this experience goes for the players. We need to remove the parent more. And I'm not saying completely, I'm saying we need to make this more about the young men and women, the boys and the girls
Yep.
growing. I mean, that's what
Yep.
college soccer used to be. It used to
Yes.
be bring in a bunch of 18-year-old boys, help them mature as people,
Yep.
as players, as teammates, as leaders. And when you spit them out at the end, they're going to be great senior players. You're going to have a great year when you have a really good group of seniors,
Yep.
and they're going to be ready for the world. And I think we need a little bit more of that in the youth soccer structure because, to your point, because there is a pay element,
Yep.
then the parents are the customers, right?
Yep.
Not the player. And
Yep.
I think that's something that I would advise parents to understand. It's not about you protecting your kid.
Hmm.
It's not about you protecting your investment in your kid.
Yep.
It's about allowing your young player, boy or girl,
Yep.
to develop as a person. At the end
Yep.
of the day, when you get to a collegiate or professional setting, it's the relationship between the player and the coach that determines everything. The parent
Correct.
is not involved. So,
Yep.
how do you, as a parent, help them get ready for that point when it comes? And the reality is, a lot of the players, whether I coach them or not in college, that have gone on to be really good pros,
Hmm.
it wasn't necessarily about talent or athleticism. It was about that maturity, the mentality, the grit. They wanted it more than others.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's a signal I tell a lot of my friends who are parents of young athletes. Like, if you want it more than your kid's not going to make it.
Exactly.
They got to be the one driving it. So
Yep.
I think that's a good reminder for people. And I think the other thing is, in the end, this is all about competition. Who's
Yep.
going to win?
Yep.
That drives everything. So if your player truly is good enough, you got to be asking yourself, okay, what am I doing to allow them to grow in those other ways so that that can shine through, because it will shine through in the end.
Exactly. Agreed. I mean, yesterday and we'll release this interview today or the next day. I interviewed Brian Pensky from Florida State, and I mean, he was phenomenal. We talked about emotional maturity with his players, and because the women's game's starting to get like this. There's a lot of women's players at 17, 18 starting to sign with NWSL clubs or European clubs and whatnot. So it's sinking into both the boys and the girls game here a little more. But he talked about emotional maturity. He said in this country, there's reasons why we usually don't win U17, U16, U18 World Cups at the youth level, at the youth national team level. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, because they're not emotionally mature yet. Where
Brooks,
I
what
just
I
think,
what I what
yeah.
I think the void is right now that I
Hmm.
did not grow up with was like, listen, when I grew up in the 90s, if you made the ODP team for your state, you
Yeah,
were with the 30 best players at your age group.
correct.
And that, quite frankly, just doesn't exist anymore
Yep.
because players are going all over the country from one location. They're playing in leagues where they play teams from states surrounding them versus just being like, no, like, who are the best people in this location?
Yep.
Like, granted, again, growing up in suburban Chicago, 8 million people, it's different than where I live now, upstate New York. But I think the thing is, and the reason I bring this up is we had a player at the last club I was a director of here in upstate New York. She is now U20 national team. She trained with the Orlando Pride for a semester before she went to college.
Hmm.
She's at Penn State, played every game she was healthy for as a freshman. Like, great start to her career and all that. But like, for us to get her, and again, we were a very small community club, for us to get her on a radar and a trajectory that allowed for all this,
Yeah.
I mean, it took a lot of like scratching and clawing and pulling strings and whatever we could. And I would like there to be a better way for these kids to get found, because
Hmm.
if it wasn't for myself and the people that we utilized to get Kennedy this access, I wonder where she would have ended up,
Yep.
because at 16, she needed to go to ECNL and be around players of that level. And
Yep.
geographically, there's nothing close to us.
Yep.
So, again, that's one example, but I bring it back to the ODP thing. I'm excited for and I'm hopeful for a future in the next 10 years where all of the USL clubs have proper academies, where we have more professional youth academies in this country, so that there are simply more entry points where players can come together and be pushed and trained and be shown, but also do it in a way where it isn't so political.
Hmm.
And there's a really good relationship with the home club, providing all the structure and the procedural stuff so that the home club doesn't feel like they have to protect this kid and hold on to them
Hmm.
because they know they would get them back if it doesn't work out.
Yep.
And I think that's a real thing that happens at the youth club level is coaches and clubs fight so hard to keep those players because they're worried about what happens once they leave. What
Yep.
happens to that team? What happens to their reputation? We have to find a way to make it a good thing that clubs are pushing players on, but we also need more youth pro academies to push them on too, because right now there's just not enough.
Yep. Agreed. Let's kind of get into the older kind of youth atmosphere here. So, you've left your hometown club for an MLS academy. People use MLS academies for different reasons. It's the pro route, it's to get seen by more colleges. So, you get to a Wake Forest to play for Bobby Muse, and you get a good degree, you get good 4 years of education. Because maybe that's something like your just local club couldn't offer you, so you needed to do it. Obviously, the intriguing part of being a pro player. But there's a lot of interesting factors into this. So this is kind of a good segment into the college stuff here. It's rather interesting nowadays because a lot of coaches that recruit players, have to be very wary of the MLS Academy kids they recruit and that they could leave for the second team contract. The interesting part of this, though, is at that youth level, that 16, 17, 18 level, which I'm starting to find more of. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with what a lot of these MLS clubs do is they sign 10 homegrowns and then it's like, all right, fight it out. Who wants to make it? You know what I mean? I more appreciate the clubs where like, we want to work with these two or three individuals. We think they have a shot. Let's keep track of the kids in college. Let's help them get to a good program and send them there. But the one thing that I notice a lot of is agents getting involved with a lot of stuff with the youth players, clubs giving kids certain agents to work with, and then that maybe entices them to sign the deal and not even consider, college soccer when, again, they're not emotionally ready to handle the pro game because the pro game's a whole nother level. This isn't you sign a pro contract and everything is, kittens and rainbows. You know what I'm saying? This is something where, all right, you're a pro now. Like, you live or die on how hard you work. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And these
yeah,
16 and 17-year-olds, even in these MLS Academy environments, don't understand that. You can train with the second team and it's a little faster, I mean, I know kids at Columbus Crew and they love training with Pippa Iguane and Josh Williams. I mean, two great guys that played for Crew. There's a standard there, but not every second team is the same standard, depending on the kids you have in your academy and then the coaches who coach it. But to me, I think people really need to be educated more on the options they have, and clubs themselves need to also keep the options open for players and not just push them towards the pro game because some of these guys get signing bonuses.
yeah. I mean, I think working in that world, and we did a lot of this at U Albany as well. We
Mhm.
had to get creative with our recruiting, so we did a lot of work with some clubs that are actually out of region.
Yep.
And listen, I think there's some of these MLS clubs are doing great work, right?
Yep.
They understand how they can leverage the collegiate game
Hmm.
to allow their products to develop in a way that's better than anything they could
Yep.
offer. Namely, because those players just aren't ready for professional. There's other clubs who say, "Yeah, we're going to sign you to a MLS Next Pro contract," and then 2 years later, it's like, "Thank you for everything you've done for the club. Good
Yeah.
luck." And
Yeah.
these are 19-year-olds who now, they can go to college and pay for it, but they've been making $40,000 a year for the last 2 years. Like they
Yep.
can't afford it. And I guess in the modern NCAA, maybe there's some way they can get eligibility, but at least 3 years ago you couldn't. So
Yep.
like that I think that spectrum of how a club can operate is very interesting. I think what people need to realize, and I won't name names or anything, is like if you are in an MLS academy, you're probably going to train with the second team at some
Yep.
point. You
Yep.
might even train with the first team.
Yep.
That does not mean you're the next player to be signed pro. Like
Agreed.
that is simply part of being in that ecosystem of that club knowing we're going to have injuries, we're going to have travel, we're going to need players to come in. We also want to give them the opportunity to see what they do with it. I think the biggest thing is, and you touched on it, like just because you sign a contract, that doesn't guarantee anything. And I
Correct.
go back to what I said earlier. There's simply just not enough professional opportunities in this country where you can do what people do in the rest of the world, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you still have to earn it every day. And we used to tell our guys in the collegiate, that wanted to go pro, it's like, listen, you definitely could get invited to a camp. You might even sign a contract, but
Mhm.
you got to realize you're going to be going up against a 36-year-old who's got to feed a family of five.
Yep.
Like, are you going to have as much urgency, as much intensity, as much desire determination as those people. And if you can and will, you have a great chance to make it.
Yep.
And I think that's that's the reality of this. I think at the same time, what we have to realize on the outside is if an MLS club is not signing their youth academy products, that's a pretty big admission that their youth academy isn't doing a great job. And I think a lot of clubs don't want to do that.
Yep.
They'd rather celebrate signing the local young kid and try to use it to be this newsworthy event, to draw fans, to get more kids inspired.
Yeah.
You can look at the Chicago Fire as a great. I mean, Brian Gutierrez. I coached his older brother at Benedictine.
Yeah.
Great kid.
Yeah.
Pushed my buttons every day, but love him to death. But I mean, Brian's a great success story, obviously.
Yep.
You then think of the older Pineda, Victor, who was
Yeah.
like Chicago Fire's first signing, and he had a very short professional career. He may still be playing. I'm not entirely sure about that, but you know what I mean? Like those are two ends of the spectrum. And in both cases, they celebrated those signings as, this huge success. And so what I come back to is like, I do think MLS clubs will take the approach of we do want to sign players for that reason. Obviously, it has no determination on whether or not these players are successful, because it does come down to where does that player fit into the team? How much are they going to keep improving? How much of the potential that they've been signed for do they realize?
Yep.
And within that, I mean, obviously, and we see it today, how many different times is the coaching staff going to change in that tenure? How many times is the general manager going to change?
Yep.
And obviously, every player has a different place in each of those coaches and managers' lives.
Yep. Agreed.
Am I wrong on Victor Pineda? Did he end up having a long-term career?
Well, I have to, because he went to UNC, right? He was the UNC that came over.
No, that's the younger one.
Sorry, the younger one. Yeah.
Yeah, he's still playing.
He is. He's still playing. He's signed. He's still in there with Berhalter in the Fire. Yep.
And the other thing too, Brooks, and I think this is something I would say to anybody. So Victor lasted 4 years with the Fire and then played until 2017. So 7 years as a pro, not a bad career at all.
No.
The other thing is like you sign a 17-year-old, like first division football it's a man's game.
It is.
Or in a woman's game. Like sometimes these young players that are athletic and have, pace and all that, they just can't handle the physicality. And it's not that they're not good enough. Maybe they're just their body and their genetics. So not to continue this line of thought, but I think there's just a lot in there that clubs don't want to see the potential they've developed go somewhere else, and they'll take that risk of signing them. But obviously, I'd love to know what the statistics are on homegrown signings to careers that lasted beyond 5 years in the MLS.
Yes,
probably not a high number.
Agreed. My baseline thing of like, if for anything, if you survive, like, consider to have a decent MLS career. If you survive 3 years and you actually contribute to the team, like you're not just the 25th guy that like gets, early US Open Cup minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like you actually get legit MLS minutes, you get spot starts and whatever. That's kind of my baseline for a lot of guys is if you contributed decently for 3 years, like that's not a bad career so far. Everyone has different.
I mean, Brooks, I coached plenty of guys in Northwestern who, they might have played 4 or 5 years and then they realize, hey, I can make more doing this or that than if I keep grinding at this. And at some point that reality does kick in.
Yeah.
We even had a player who got drafted by Salt Lake just say no because he went to Merrill Lynch and he's now making way, way too much money. Not too much, but he's making so much and he's doing very well for himself. Very successful, very self-made individual, Clarkston, Michigan kid. So happy to see him doing well.
Is that Coupe?
Oh yeah. Oliver was such a good player. I mean, going back to development, Ollie came in as a very athletic, multi-sport athlete, big body, played basketball at a very high level. Mm-hmm. I hate to use the word raw, but he definitely had a lot of skill development that he worked on in his time at Northwestern. And then in his last 2 years, he scored 10 goals each season, including Ollie was always a big game goal scorer. So, scoring against Notre Dame, against Michigan State, had the big one against Penn State in the Big Ten championship. Like, I think, again, a lot of people would have looked at Oliver at 17, 18 and be like, oh, yeah, athletic, but where's the skill? And
Yep.
again, each person runs their own race in this game.
Yep. Agreed. All right. And let's kind of, we'll get into the college recruiting here. So this is always an interesting one to me. I think every parent that plays at an MLS Next Academy in the homegrown division, at least, I don't know, this new academy division is brand new. It's the second tier. It's relatively new. But the reality and truth is, just because you play in something that has MLS Next in it, does not guarantee that every ACC school and every top program you have a chance to get into. I help kids with recruiting. People will reach out to me randomly. I luckily placed a kid with Ty Diegley at IU that plays for Penn Fusion. He'll come in this fall. I'm very excited to watch him play because I think he'll be a good one for Todd. Maybe not right away, but he'll earn minutes. But people and parents have a very hard time understanding because they don't watch the game enough, the level of what their child is actually at compared to what the hopes and dreams they have for the kid. And I am not ever a person to crush someone's hopes and dreams, but there is a reality aspect to it. And every kid that I get, okay, first question, what schools do you want? Well, I want, they all look at the top 25 and who was in the College Cup. And I'm like,
the schools they watch on TV, right?
exactly. And I'm just like, you send me a highlight video. Like, I'm sorry, like Clemson, look at the roster, look who, Noonan brings, he brings in, and, it's international, is a lot of local kids, you know what I mean? Like, it's good to dream, but there's a reality aspect to it when you start to get into your junior and senior year of what you want. And some kids are very stubborn with that. I mean, I think there's a lot of good small programs I push kids to and coaches I know that I think he'd be a good coach for you. If you're open to it, it's academically fits you. It's a good place you'd like to, you want to be geographically. Like, I think this is a good one. And for me, just talk about the aspect of just because you play in MLS Next or you play for a high ECNL club doesn't guarantee that every top college is looking at you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to break down this idea of association, dictates that you're going to get somewhere, right? Like, just because you're on a club or a team, at a club or on a team that has ECNL or MLS Next, like, that doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
There are tremendous players that have much more successful careers who play no club soccer or play at a club team you've never heard of, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are ECNL players who come in as freshmen and have a much higher impact than players who were at MLS Next. I think parents really need to understand all that means is you have an opportunity to compete in that environment. It doesn't guarantee anything.
Yes.
I'll try to break this down in a few ways, Brooks. Talked to a lot of my buddies after the MLS Next event in what was it, Phoenix this year?
Yeah,
last month. Last month. MLS Next Fest.
Mm-hmm.
Really hard for one coach or one coaching staff to cover 25 fields at the same time.
Yes.
So when it comes down to it, where are they going to go watch it? Let's say 2 or 3 of them are there. You got 25 games going on. They're going to go watch probably the higher division if they're a Division I program.
Yep.
If they're not a Division I program, there's all these criteria will factor the same way, just with a different lens, right? And they're probably going to go watch the teams that they want to see more of a player or more of that team, or teams from their market.
Yep.
Because the reality is, with everybody there, if they just if I'm a coach in New York and I go watch a bunch of California clubs, how am I getting those clubs?
Exactly.
How am I getting those kids to come?
Yep.
So I think in its inception, great that everything's at one place under one umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
You got to understand the realities of, well, that doesn't mean you're now going to get seen. And I wonder what the academy division, clubs were what their attendance was by colleges, if it was any different than before, et cetera, because it's just hard to see those games when everything is going on. So that's one piece.
Yep.
The other piece is if you're a college coach, you did it for 2 decades like I did, or you've been doing it for 5 years, just because that club is now MLS Next doesn't change who that club is to the coaches.
Exactly.
We still know who they are.
Yeah.
Still know who those coaches are.
Yep.
It hasn't it's not suddenly that club is now entirely different because they have a different badge or they're in a different league. It obviously means they've done something to earn that opportunity.
Yes.
But there's still the relationship with that club and the coach is the same as it was before. And I think that's the one thing that parents might want to understand a bit better is like your coach can promise he knows everybody and he may or she
Yeah.
may,
Yep.
but it really does come down to like what's the track record of that club and that coach
Correct.
and how involved can they really be in introducing a player? Because coaches introduce players all the time. The player still has to be good enough. But,
Yes.
if they are willing to pick up the phone or they have a good network of colleges that they've worked with in the past
Yep.
and can do that, how does a parent verify that or justify that?
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing I'll say that's important, and it like this, I think just goes above and beyond the badges. It's like college coaches want to win.
Yes.
They want to win and they want to have as few headaches off the field because they know that if we can have focus on the field, on
Yeah.
the process of becoming better athletes, becoming better players, becoming better as a team, we're gonna have the best chances. But they want to win.
Yep.
So you could be the 12th player on New England Revolution who gets 30 minutes a game,
Yep.
or you could be the first player on name any MLS Next team
Mm-hmm.
in that same region as the Revolution,
Yep.
but you're the best player and you're impacting every game.
Yep.
I'd rather have the impact player.
Correct.
The kid who's playing 30 minutes a game, like I have no reason to believe that they're going to come to college and impact when they can't even start on that team.
Correct.
So some people would say, oh, he's in the Revolution Academy. He's better than everybody. Not necessarily.
Yep.
Now he could be on a Revolution Academy team that has 6 future pros that have 10-year careers. Or he could be the second best left back on a team that has a left back that will have a 15-year career and be on the national team.
Yep.
Every scenario is different. But I think the important thing to remember is like college coaches want to win. That's what they're paid to do. That's what their job is on the line for. They obviously have to have a clean house. They got to have good people in their program. They want to have kids who go on and do great things after college. But most importantly, like competition is why they do this.
Yep.
Why they don't get paid enough for this, why they deal with the transfer portal, why
Yep.
they deal with all the moving parts. So that's I think an important lens that parents have to understand is like where and players need to understand this. Where can I go that I'll have an impact? And how does my current situation make my case for that?
Yep.
Because I'll bring the transfer portal up and I don't want to go on this too hard, but like the reality is, and joining the corporate world, I understand this. Like, if I can go hire a proven salesperson or hire somebody who's never done sales before, I'm going to hire the proven one.
Yes.
If I can go spend 60% of a scholarship on a guy who scored 15 goals at D2 last year,
Mm-hmm.
or take an 18-year-old who's never played against U23 or some cases 26 at this point.
Yeah.
Who do I have more faith in? And so you're competing with that, even though you're not in that in terms of spots for players.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I'll get back to like, to me as just a scout, it's just you have to play consistently. Like the one thing that you can control as a player without the politics and the BS, without have to asking the coach or using a stupid recruiting service, because all these recruiting services now, I can get you there, I can get you there. And it's a joke. Like everyone does this and everyone pays this money and these people are making jobs of it. And listen, if you're undeniably a consistent player in the field that shows and is one of you the best, you can pretty much almost have the pick of where you want to go. You know what I mean? At least within your state and in your region. Now, when you get national, that's a whole nother aspect. If you're playing MLS Academy and you're in these big tournaments and you're scoring goals and everyone sees you in the clips on social media and whatever, I get that. But
well, I mean, Brooks, here's the other reality. I'll
Yeah.
use this example. Last year at UAlbany, we had 2 strikers who were our leading scorers, and both were Division III transfers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we had a striker the year before from an MLS Academy
Mm-hmm.
who had trained with the first team, done all that.
Mm-hmm.
We had players from other MLS academies. We had domestic players who had all the accolades. We had other older internationals.
Yeah.
These 2 players had proven themselves at Division III, and they were rightfully at Division III for reasons, right?
Yeah.
One was just you weren't sure how good of an athlete he was as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
The other one needed to mature.
Yep.
Now, I say this, One of them is playing, and they went on to have very good collegiate careers at Division 1 in the next 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
One is playing lower level in Spain, scoring goals, scored in the Copa del Rey against a La Liga side. I don't remember who it
Yeah.
was. The other one just got drafted by Miami. So I share that because I think what players need to understand is your entry point into the collegiate game is no longer your exit point. That's
Correct.
for sure with the
Correct.
transfer portal.
Yep.
And you want to go somewhere in the first case where you would be excited to end there, but also you want to have a place where you're going to have the opportunity to compete because that's the
Exactly.
reality is for
Yep.
everything we're doing at the youth level, nobody wants to go and sit for 4 years and just graduate. And I
Correct.
understand why.
Yep.
Some kids might be like, you know what? That's all I want to do. I want to go be at UNC or Michigan State or
Mhm.
Northwestern, and whatever happens, happens. But like as a coach, I might not want that player because they're not pushing it every day, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So what I advise players to think about is where can I go and have an impact? Where can I go and I'll get better? Where can
Yep.
I go and I am going to have the opportunity to play, prove myself, and impact. And then you get into this game of, okay, well, is this still the place for me? Have I developed enough? Have I proven enough?
Hmm.
Do I really feel a need to leave? Or does it get to the point where I've done so well? I mean, in one case of those two D3 transfers I'm talking about, he had scored 48 goals in 2 years at Division 3. He
Pretty
was
good.
ready.
Yep.
It was evident. It
Yep.
was evident to him, the coach, everybody. So I think that's a pathway that families need to understand. And it's not just D3 to D1. I mean, there's junior college,
NAI.
there's NAA, there's
Yeah.
gap years, there's
Yeah.
there's a ton of ways. There's a ton of ways you can work within the domestic system to do a gap year and still play MLS Next for another year
Yep.
and just further mature. Maybe you take on a job. Maybe you take on a couple part-time junior college courses.
Hmm.
There's a ton of ways I think to navigate this that are not A to B, and that's okay.
Correct. And that's what I always tell people. Like, nothing is linear in this country. There is no, we talk about pyramids and moving up the pyramid. There is no, most kids don't go the linear route. They
Right.
it's like your
to
grades
to
aren't good
relate
enough.
it to relate it to lacrosse again,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you have to be a stud in college
Yeah.
at Division 1
Yeah.
to be in the PLL or the WLL.
Yep.
That's just it. And
Exactly.
in the WLL case, you probably have to be a stud at like one of 10 programs.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're on the outside looking at. And
Yep.
it's not like that. It's not NBA basketball.
Correct.
It's not. You have to go be a star in March Madness to get to the NBA.
Correct. Or NFL. It's not the same way. And that's the problem with soccer is we relate it to what the other sports do, and we're not like that. I mean, you know, you can bounce around to different MLS academies and go to college and find something. You can, skip college, go to USL, go overseas, come back, find them, like there's a whole bunch of ways to get to where you want to get to. And I think people think there's this perfect route to go through and they want to, they're like, I have to do this. I have to do it this way. And like, that's why I tell people, keep your options open. I mean, there's been a lot of great players. Dylan Borchek, for example. He was a Schoolcraft kid for 2 years, and then he went to Oakland and had a good career. And he had a good Memphis. He was good. He got hurt. He hurt his hamstring last year at Lexington, but he should be back this year, and hopefully, he'll be starting and playing more. But there's a lot of success stories in a lot of different ways in this sport.
I mean, think of Steve Clark, who's now coaching the
Yeah,
Jaguars. I mean,
yeah,
what a tremendous career! And I got to know Steve a little bit at the North American Soccer Expo. What a
yeah,
fantastic guy! But I mean, he played for some youth club we've never heard of,
yeah.
right?
In Mason, Michigan. Yeah,
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 and just completely killed it. Grew at the collegiate level
at
and
Oakland.
got
Yep,
to got
yep,
to exactly at Oakland. That's why I thought of
yep,
him,
yep,
and got to MLS and had a career any of us would wish for. I mean,
yeah.
I think one of the really challenging things right now, especially in the social media era, Brooks, is just this comparison syndrome.
Yes,
And
yes.
and I'll use a personal example. Like I grew up a town over from Jonathan Spector. We're the same birth year. We were on the same ODP team.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guarded him in high school basketball. We played his high school. He guest played with my team. Like nowadays, anybody in that situation would be like, oh, I'm just as good as Jonathan Spector. We're on the same team. We're on the ODP team. Like I
Yep,
should sign with Man United. And
exactly.
I think that's something that players and parents really struggle with,
Yep.
especially because they can know everything that's going on
Yep.
with some kid at some club that they played on because they can just go on Instagram and find out what's going on with that kid.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so they all get lost in that what's going on outside, and they're not thinking about, what do I need? What do I need to be doing, and where do I need to go? They all worry about, oh, so and so committed to Maryland. Well, I should be going to Maryland.
Yep.
And I think that's a really hard psychological thing for a lot of people.
It is. It is. All right, let's jump into another interesting topic that people love to talk about for college is international and domestic. Listen, I think it goes back to a lot of what we said, maturity, the willingness to want to win, the environment that those international players are in. I mean, it's not the same as what these MLS Next and ECL, most of the programs are, unfortunately. When I scout MLS Next, I rarely see a program where I feel like, there's, at least six legit players in the starting 11. I mean, it's usually always one or two, you know what I mean? And usually maybe a few other ones for, the opponent. But the reality is this. People can complain all they want about international players and them taking spots for domestic, but like you said, college coaches want to win. Chris Grassi at Marshall won a national title. Listen, I think a lot of domestic players don't want to end up going to Marshall. Like it's not a very attractive place to them. But for the international, it's like they don't know. They don't know where Marshall University is. They just want to play soccer and play for a great coach like Chris Grassi. And, every college is going to be different with how they recruit players. But the smaller division schools, need to dip into those internationals because, they're going to lose out to a lot of the better local players to bigger universities. But for me, it's competition. If you're a parent complaining about this stuff, your kid just needs to be better. You know what I mean? Like it's just everyone wants to play the victim mindset in my opinion. Oh, they're doing this. Oh, they're doing that. Is it a little easy for internationals to come over here? Probably. It's a little more easier than saying a American wanting to going over to England or whatever, because you have to get all the license, the green card and go through all the process. It's much more difficult for sure. But there's too many people, in my opinion, playing the victim mindset where they need to look at it as the opportunity of, all right, this is a better player. Like I'm going to go prove myself at this university, or I'm going to prove to this college coach, when they're scouting me and recruiting me on why I'm better than the international prospect that, they got some email from or whatnot. So I don't know. How do you look at the international versus domestic debate here in college soccer?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it, and I'll try to be as like well-rounded here as possible. You're
Yeah.
spot on. It started. I mean, I remember being a senior in college. So
Hmm.
2006, we played Greensboro in the Sweet 16.
Yep.
And a bunch of Icelandics, right?
Yeah.
Like that was something you didn't see back then, but
Yeah.
they had a long history of doing that. And I imagine if you're UNC Greensboro going against Duke and NC State and Wake Forest and UNC,
Mhm.
you're not getting the players from North Carolina that can go and beat those teams, but that's what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
So you say, all right, where could we get players that those schools aren't going to get? And at that time, that was a route that they could go.
Hmm.
So I think that's how it started, right? You saw it pop up in a lot of the mid majors, a lot of the programs that, maybe they had one player before and now that player becomes a player source.
Hmm.
And it's gone completely the other way because what happened is, take Albany 2 years before I got there, Trevor did a great job. He had a tremendous mix of New York and domestic players with some really good professionals. I mean,
Yep.
Daniel Cruzan, who's now back with the Forge, Nico Solabarrieta, Afonso Pinheiro, Danny
Hmm.
Vitiello, goalkeeper for the Republic, like
Yeah.
some players. And, they beat Maryland. They
Yep.
beat BC. They played Clemson in the Sweet 16, like
Hmm.
competing. I mean, this is the University of Albany
Yeah.
competing with these blue blood programs. So
Yeah.
it worked, and now it's on overdrive. I think
Yes.
what families have to understand is if you're a player in Europe or South America, you do not have any way you can combine the university level we have here or
Correct.
with the competitive nature that is still pushing you towards a professional level. That doesn't
Correct.
exist.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
so, NCAA Division One is a very attractive destination for those players who do not sign pro.
Yep.
In a lot of cases, in a lot of those countries, the facilities, the support system, when we're talking about 4 full-time coaches, athletic trainer, nutritionist,
Hmm.
all of those things don't exist to the
Yep.
level. The facilities are better here. The
Mhm.
support is better here.
Yep.
So those things make it very attractive. And what else is, I think, become the reality is those players tend to be very clear with what they want. And you touched on it before. They see any location in the US as
Opportunity.
great
Yep.
opportunity.
Yep.
There are a lot of kids who would never look at Huntington, West Virginia,
Yep.
Albany, New York,
Yep.
Charleston, Illinois, like you name it,
Yeah.
as somewhere they want to go because of what's been ingrained in them for 18 years.
Yep.
And that's just the reality. Sometimes these players from overseas come over older. They do tend to come over more mature, as we've discussed. I mean,
Yep.
they're moving halfway around the world. They already speak a second language.
Mhm.
They've probably, in many cases, already played with older players, so none
Yep.
of that is new to them.
Correct.
And they understand the cutthroat and the competition. I
Yes.
think going back to what I said earlier, and I fully believe this, like there's almost a participation award approach from a lot of
Yeah.
domestic families that like,
Yes.
oh, I deserve every up. Well, it's like, no, you got to earn it.
Yep.
And it also helps if we know, can you afford this? What can you afford?
Correct.
If you come here, you're going to give us your all, or are you going to be homesick in 2 weeks? Like
Mhm.
those, back to the mentality and the character and just the maturity, those things, like they're tough sometimes. And in a lot of cases, Brooks, to be honest with you, when you take the top 30 to 40 schools out, not programs, but like the ACC, the Big Ten,
Mhm.
in a lot of cases, anybody who's been in an MLS academy will look at those other schools and say, well, no, that's a step backwards. Like
Yep.
that's their perspective,
Yep.
is they don't see the opportunity. They see,
Correct.
well, I'm not playing 10 months of the year. I'm now playing 3 months of the year.
Yep.
I'm not chartering flights. I'm chartering buses.
Exactly.
Not
I don't get nice facilities. There's no pro coach to coach me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that perspective, just it makes it really hard. Now, again, if you're Mark Hubbard at NC State or Shaka at Michigan,
Yeah.
Damon, like it's a different thing because you have something that everybody wants. And
Correct.
the reality is with 200 plus Division I programs, most of them are not those, but they're trying
Correct.
to compete with those.
Correct. Yes.
And I think just understanding that perspective of how the internationals look at it, of how many American players have come in and it just they've given up after 6 weeks, or they thought they were going to be a starter right away and they didn't appreciate how difficult it is. It
Right.
has, in a lot of ways, made it harder for others to prove otherwise.
Yep. Yep. I agree. It's an interesting one.
And I go back to it, Brooks. Like the head coach is a CEO of a 28-person company. He's only got so much, salary to put out.
Yep.
Who's he going to invest that salary in?
Exactly.
Right.
And you're going to invest in the experienced guys that have already done it, and I get it.
And you're going to invest in the ones where you really feel confident that they can make it as a person as
Yep.
well as a player. And,
Yep.
and I think that's the challenging thing right now for a lot of young American players, is how do they prove they can be one of those?
Agreed. But what I would say too is always, which I think most college coaches are open to, is if, we'll get you on this salary when you start with us, but there's always opportunity to earn more. And that's just like the real world. You have the opportunity to go grab it. It's just some kids, are like, oh, I only get that offer. Like, oh, there's probably a better one out there. When in reality, most of the time, and there isn't. It's just, it's all about
And
opportunities, taking chances.
And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that a 17-year-old, male or female in the U.S. should know exactly what they want to be at 22 or any of
Agreed.
that. Like I
Agreed.
was not that person,
Yeah.
but I think having the wherewithal and the character to understand the challenge in front of you, to understand how hard it's going to be, and
Yep.
to take it on. The reality is right now in society, we've made it very easy to go on LinkedIn and find another job, or go in the
Mhm.
transfer portal and go somewhere else when
Yep.
things get tough. And I don't love that. And
Yeah.
it's no different in the club level,
Yep.
because if so and so isn't on the first team or isn't, getting put up for the identification center, they go to another club. So
Yep.
I think we just have to realize, like, what are we teaching our young kids by
Mhm.
just moving them around or giving them these avenues about like getting to the top? Nobody gets to the top just by it being easy the whole way. Nobody,
Correct.
I mentioned him before. Like I don't know Duncan McGuire. I know that some of the guys who coached him.
Yeah.
You know, for 2 years he didn't really do much, and in his third year he scored 23 goals, and now he's with the
Yep.
national team. He's had a good career when he's not been injured. Like
Yep.
I think like people need to understand that that approach has a way better success rate than just chasing things because it didn't work out for a few weeks here or there. And
Yep.
that goes back to mentality and maturity.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed. And when from a scouting perspective, I'm just to finish up here before we move into the college, into the pro, is that, it's a red flag for me when a guy transfers about 4 or 5 times. It's either you have character issues or you didn't want to stick it out and compete. And if you're not going to compete, then how are you going to be a pro? So, that's to me, that's what I look at it as that. Like, I get you the
And Brooks,
situation. Yeah. Yeah.
there are situations where a player doesn't fit a coach or doesn't fit a system, and like
Correct.
transferring is the right thing.
Correct. Yes.
Like I
Correct.
don't want to say it's like entirely and completely the wrong
No,
thing. I
no.
mean, I
But when
actually,
you do it multiple times, there's something that's an issue. And I get it. Like you go to a program, you thought it was going to be what you wanted, and or maybe like you said, you get homesick, you want to go more back in the region, you felt more comfortable with another coach. There's still an opportunity. I get that 100%. Like
yeah,
100%. Like that is the good thing that the portal has brought to this. That's one of the good things it has, but it's also brought just a lot of other chaos, unfortunately, where again, I'm a free agent every year. I can move wherever I want. There's not, I mean, it's harsh to say, but there's a sucker coach somewhere that if I put good enough highlight video together, or I get enough people to speak about me, that I can move into that program and, somehow, persuade the coaching staff to take me when I'm not of that level anyways. You know what I mean? I see
I
a lot of that,
I always enjoyed working with the kids who bet on themselves, right?
Yes.
Who
Yeah.
who and they're the ones who had the most success when I think about 20 years of doing it,
Yep.
and even some of the guys I played with. But I do think, you know, the other thing that just it has to be said is like we we will have players who don't work out
Yep.
for the wrong reasons and for the right reasons.
Hmm.
If you're doing it really well, there's still 12 to 28 who's on the bench.
Correct. Yes.
And if you're doing it really badly, there's 1 to 2 who are pretty good, and the rest of it's not good enough. And those two
Yeah.
want to move on because they want to be at a better program. And
Yep.
that's the reality. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. I think at the end of the day, when we talk about it from a youth perspective, it's like go and watch games.
Yes.
Everybody
College,
wants to
especially.
everybody wants to not watch
Oh,
college soccer, and they'll point to
correct.
the it's too international, it's too physical.
It's
Well,
too
listen,
direct. It's
if you
actually
are
better than
if
people
you
think it
if
is.
you if you are yeah if you are literally putting your kid through youth soccer, or your kid
Mhm.
is chasing youth soccer to get
Yep.
to college, go
Yep.
watch games.
Yes. Of course.
And ask yourself as a player, could I step into this tomorrow?
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
think like some of my fondest memories coaching were at the Division 3 level. We had some fantastic players. We had accomplished some things that had never happened. The games were more fun in some ways.
Yeah.
Like I think so many kids going back to it just want to go to the places they see on TV. There's
Yep.
so many great opportunities out there in the collegiate system.
There is.
And I think that's one thing that, go watch games, because you might go watch, you know, Calvin play Hope and realize like, oh my gosh, this is a really good level. And
Yeah.
I couldn't step into this tomorrow either, but I would really like to be a part of that,
Mhm.
just as much as I'd like to be at Oakland or Michigan State or Western Michigan, etc.
Exactly. All right, so kind of jumping in, in your latter stages of your college career, or you're in the, now most cases the middle. I mean, the draft is open up where you can draft sophomores. I mean, sophomores can get GA contracts, so can freshmen, but there's kind of more limited number. They're not giving out 5 or 6 GAs anymore. It's, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes they're not established until like a few days before the draft sometimes because they're still trying to figure stuff out. But you know, preparing for the pro game when you're a college player, you've been at Northwestern, you've been at Albany, you've been a Division 3 coach at Benedictine. What are you telling your guys that, some may come in and they may be like, I just want to play right now, and then we'll see where it gets to, and they kind of get to that level, and you start having those conversations. I'm just very curious. I've always thought is like, obviously you want to work it out. Like if you want to be a pro player, that you get these classes taken care of, or maybe you only have online stuff left to take care of whenever you leave, and you set yourself in good standing. I know in some cases, some universities, if you're there for an X number of years, your college scholarship carries over, and you can come back and use it when you're done. But just from you being an assistant coach, just the preparation of preparing a kid to be a pro, that wants to be a pro, kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Josh Sargent was coming up through Scott Gallagher, and that was the first time we heard about the lifetime scholarship,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think all the programs in the country were willing to offer him a lifetime scholarship because they knew he was a one and done if he went at all. And
Yeah.
obviously, he never went anywhere, and
Yeah.
he's been in Europe for a long time now.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think there's a couple aspects to this, right? I think when you have special players, and sometimes you don't know you have a special player until it's over, and you realize what you're not going to have anymore, and
Yeah.
you realize how valuable that could be for the pro setting. I think
Mhm.
the schools and the colleges have done a really good job of figuring out the academic side.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
also think, like, let's be honest, right now in modern college athletics, forget college soccer, like school is not. I mean, they're not the student athlete anymore. They're the athlete
Correct.
student. That's just the reality. They're
Yep.
getting paid because of their athleticism. They're getting revenue share because they're an athlete. So
Yep.
let's throw that out the window.
Mhm.
But no, I think the schools have done a good job, and especially, I know at Albany we put a lot of time into this about getting guys on December graduations so that they were available, whether
Yep.
they were going, back home to another country, entering MLS, whatever. The death sentence for a long time was getting drafted or getting a camp invite to MLS, because generally what would happen is you wouldn't have a contract. You'd want to go to that preseason,
Yep.
but that preseason would eliminate any opportunity to sign with a USL club, that might actually be a
Yeah.
long-term fit for you.
Yep.
And so working through those deliberations, I think we're always the hardest of really getting a good sense from the pro clubs of where does this player potentially fit in, and what is the reality that they actually get a contract.
Yep.
I'll give you a good example. I mentioned him earlier, Daniel Crutzen. Daniel was All-American at Albany, fantastic player. I was only able to work with him his senior year, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, he had picked up a surgery or an operation in USL ball, USL 2 with Reading,
Mhm.
like end of July. So it
Yeah.
was a small procedure, but it limited what he could do his senior year.
Yep.
Wand of a left foot, very versatile player. Daniel had MLS, he would have been a draft pick. He was rated like the number 6 prospect in the USL that summer until the
Mhm.
injury. But he had MLS camp offers, he had USL contracts, and he had a Canadian Premier League contract. And
Mhm.
he took the Canadian Premier League. And I should mention, Daniel, Belgian player, could have gone back to Ghent or Genk, whatever club he was from, and signed there as well.
Wow.
He chose the CPL because he knew he could play right
Yep.
away. If he had gone to MLS camp, he might not have had those opportunities. They might have had to go offer someone else.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
also
remember what.
international working against them too. The people don't understand it
Correct.
as well. International works against you. The CPL may be more likely to take you for sure. So
Correct. Now he
yeah.
goes to the CPL. He wins 3 championships in 4 years, captain of the Hamilton Forge. He gets a
Mhm.
contract with Phoenix Rising.
Yep.
Again, I just think, like, here's a player who really high ceiling, and he's now back playing, which I love because he had some injury issues.
Mhm.
He'd become an agent for a while. But he's back with the Forge and playing. Like, even he had to navigate that stuff. And for many years, we talked about, oh, we want to see the proven Americans go over to Europe. But if you go to Europe and don't play, what's the point? So I think, like, there needs to be an understanding that just because you get an opportunity or you get some interest from MLS, that doesn't mean a contract. And even
Correct.
if it does mean a contract nowadays with this 2 team, like,
Mhm.
what is the 2 environment? Is it you're playing with the 17 and 19-year-olds, or is it you're playing against pros? And
Yeah.
for every club, it's a little bit different there. So
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing when you talk about the preparation side, not the navigation of when that comes, is like, again, it's on the maturity side because you're taking players who have probably started and played 90 minutes for the last 2 or 3 years
Hmm.
and getting them to understand like you're going to have to earn every second again. You
Yep.
know, if I talk about Tyler Miller or Danny Vitiello, right, like that's a different environment. You're
Yep.
going into a club now. In Danny's case at Nashville the year before they became an MLS club. In
Hmm.
Tyler's case, he went to Germany before he got to Seattle. Like when you get to those MLS clubs, though, you're going in as the third, maybe the second.
Yep.
And chances are the first guy isn't someone you're considered next to yet. You know,
Correct. Yep.
when Danny got to Pittsburgh, the year he won Golden Glove at Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
he came in as the second, and they were really high on the third. He was a young college kid.
Hmm.
I mean, by the end of the year, Danny had won the starting job and been the Golden Glove winner. So
Yeah.
had a great year. But like again, you have to have a certain mentality to go into that setting
Yeah.
and not just be looking down at the third, but say, no, my sights are on that. So I come back to like there's a little bit college coaches can do, Brooks, but really it does come back to that individual. And I
Sure.
think with any of the guys that have gone pro or even the young player I'm talking about locally here who's in the early stages of her, post youth career, like
Hmm.
all of them do a lot on their own.
Yep.
All of them have always done a lot on their own. They haven't just relied on what, the team session was or the
Hmm.
team weight room was or what, the team meals provided. Like they always have been really involved and invested in their routine. And oftentimes they've done a lot on their own
Yep.
when they go back for break, when they're home in the summers. Those things are what really determine players who are going to be ready for that environment.
Yep.
Also, if you're doing a lot on your own, you're probably going to keep getting better while other players aren't. And so I think like that's a piece that has always stood out across all the players that I've seen go on and have good careers.
Hmm.
And then you got to have a little bit of luck, right? You got to have the physical aspects, you got to have the health, and you got to have a little bit of luck. I mean, one of my good friends and teammates, Dave Roth, was never injured in his career. I think he missed like a portion of one game in the Big Ten tournament one year. Gets to Red Bull, has a season ender of an injury, like 2 games into preseason, never played again.
Yep.
And that's the reality. You do have to have a little bit of luck, and you have to end up in a place where someone sees something in you. But ultimately, it does come back to that routine and that mentality internally.
Yeah. And it's rough, I think, with, just going back to the domestic pro game and then looking into college. I run the Midwest Pro Combine. We bring a bunch of good domestic college players or just international players that play in college, in front of USL clubs and some MLS clubs. And, we run that once every just, one December every year, right after, the finals are done for a lot of college students. And, it's rough is I get MLS, like the world is kind of your oyster at this point because of how much it's grown. For me, I wish more, particularly USL clubs, lower end championship and League One sides, dipped into the college game more and it's rough. Unfortunately, for some reason, just the domestic player, and I don't understand why, the USL or US soccer doesn't try to do something to make more like other countries, because other countries are so pro their domestic league. It's so hard for internationals, to go over there and play because you can only have so many spots.
Yeah.
But for me, like and I get it's not easy as a college coach too, because when there's so much constant rotation and change and international coaches being brought over here to coach these USL teams, whether they have the business of being brought over here to coach or not, because not a lot of them have the connections to the local game. And I think that's kind of ruffled some of the domestic players getting into have pro jobs as well. I mean, it's rough to navigate. I mean, you can only do so much as a college coach, unfortunately. You can prepare them as much as you can, and they can do as much as they can on their own. But like you said, it's very much chance, and you know, it's the USL clubs, the domestic clubs wanting to do the domestic scouting, to identify players, and that's unfortunately just the rub. Unfortunately, is
Yeah.
MLS. We spend so much on our academy, like, and I get it. You want to take the kid if you think it doesn't go against your cap if you do homegrown. There's a lot of benefits to it. You've known the kid for a very long time, but it's not it doesn't feel very good as a college coach when you've been training these guys and they're better than the homegrown kids and they don't even, get a sniff. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's a really interesting environment, Brooks, nowadays, especially because we had a player at Albany. He was came in during the COVID year, so
Hmm.
obviously not a perfect experience, but Whitecaps product, really good player for us in the
Hmm.
limited season.
Hmm.
He gets offered a two opportunity with the Whitecaps. He was also training with the national team at the time. He was a not as a rostered player, but as a practice player. So
Hmm.
as a center back defending Alfonso Davies and Jonathan David, like
Yeah.
I understand. So took the opportunity, and it's
Mhm.
like not commenting on where his career has gone, but
Yeah.
you look at the games he's now playing, and he's got guys coming down from the first team who haven't played or are injured.
Yeah.
He's got 17-year-old academy players.
Yeah.
He's got 19-year-old homegrown signed products. He's got players on his roster who played 4 years and were all Americans,
Yep.
and players like himself who did 1 year. And there's
Yep.
that is such a weird spectrum of players
Yes.
that I just don't know like how that's an easy one to mentally navigate to understand of like
Yeah.
where is this heading,
Yeah.
and inevitably at the end of that season or the next season like 80% of those players were gone,
Hmm.
either because they let them go, they didn't sign them to a two contract, or the first team and let them go and now they're on the two. I mean, there was so many different like just moving pieces.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, I remember 10 years ago where you'd get to the fourth round of the draft and certain clubs would just pass. They wouldn't even
Yeah.
take anybody.
Yeah.
Everybody would be like, oh, that's a slap in the face of the college system.
Yep.
Hey, maybe those clubs know that they're going to take three academy players into
Yep.
preseason and they
Yep.
don't want to fill anybody with delusional hope.
Correct.
Like I'm not saying either side is right, but
Yeah.
I do think, to your point, you bring up a really good one. There is so much invested nowadays in these academies that,
Mhm.
and going back to what I said before about the marketing piece of signing a homegrown,
Yeah.
I do think the clubs are a bit more, keen on that. This goes without saying, at the youth level and at the collegiate level, like the average of soccer continues to get better year after.
Correct.
Like at our ID camps, we'd have 80 kids. You'd take a look at maybe four of them, but like the average level, the average player continues to get better.
Correct.
I don't want that to be misunderstood.
Yep.
And does that mean it's good enough? I'm not getting into that debate, but what I am trying to say is like that means it gets harder to be an impact person. That means it gets harder to be a differentiator.
Yep.
And in some cases, it makes it easier to really, as a pro, identify who those are. But it can also muddy the waters into, well, I'm not sure this player is going to be special at the pro game just because they are at this game. And
Yep.
I would say that like you're spot on. Like colleges are going to believe in what they're doing, especially if they have a great year and they have players who get accolades and players who they know are irreplaceable in the squad.
Yep.
But us as college coaches are not the ones who have spots on a roster or a preseason camp to run or a game model to fulfill.
Yeah.
So we will never agree on how we see that player to the people who are actually running those pro clubs, and every
Yep.
pro club is different.
Yep. And that, I mean, listen, that's what just we do at the soccer syndicate. That's why we're so much into the college game and, we've done the youth game. It's just player identification and scouting it's so difficult because you have to watch a kid so much live, like not on video, live to get a really good understanding of the player and know what his limitations are and understand his character and his ability. And that's when you can make very much a determining factor. Like I know everyone loves to stats and all this stuff, and they think it translates to everything, and some of it does, some of it doesn't. But just the reality of it is you have to put the time and effort to watch players at whatever level to get a good feeling for them. And unfortunately, a lot of teams take the path less chosen. I mean, they take the easier route, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Brooks,
Yeah.
I did want to say this because it applies,
Yeah.
to college recruiting as well as
Yeah.
the pro game
Yeah.
is the shinier object, the grass is always greener type concept of you, you'd see certain programs not recruit a lot, especially state schools from
Yeah.
their own backyard.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just like they've seen those players so much that they've maybe in some ways lowered their opinion of what that player is
Yeah.
versus the out of region player they see once or twice. And the two
Correct.
times they've seen them, they're like, ooh, there's something there.
Yep.
I'd rather take a flyer on that kid than go to the kid that I've seen 8 to 10 times
Yeah.
just because maybe there's a bit more potential there.
Yep.
And oftentimes, I mean, it's probably a coin flip, but like
Yep.
there's often times where that local kid would have been a better option.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I think that's happening a bit when we talk about the pro side, right? Of if we can get this young South American who maybe we can sell,
Mm-hmm.
or if we go get this player with a European background,
Yep.
it there's more juice to it from a marketing, appearance side.
Yes.
There may actually be less juice to it from a production side.
Exactly. No, that's a great way to put it. Well, we've been at this for a while. I think we've covered a lot of it, honestly, more in depth than at least I've seen a lot of stuff, honestly, when I'm browsing through YouTube and social media. So, um, Rich, you have anything just else to add before we close here?
Yeah, I mean, I listen. I think of it to anybody who's listening that has a young player or a player who's entering college or going after college. It's like I think we're in an era right now where players have to stop worrying about what's going on around them.
Hmm.
It's so easy, as I said before, to get into comparison mode. Like I said, the best players, they're doing things on their own time. They're not doing things on their own time because they saw somebody do that on social media. They're putting their phones down and they're
Yep.
getting after it. And I think the more parents and players can kind of step back from that very enticing cliff of comparison mode, of controlling the narrative, of
Hmm.
club hopping because mom or dad isn't happy with, like, no, just focus on, is the player getting better? We always used to start every preseason at Northwestern talking to the parents of the freshmen
Yep.
about if you prepared your player for the path, not prepared the path for your player, they're gonna do great. And I
Hmm.
think that's an important, as you mentioned, I'm a father of two young kids. Like I'm always about that. What
Yep.
skills and what behaviors and what attributes am I putting into my kids so that they can handle what comes their way? I think too much right now, it's about trying to use every lever to prop my kid up. No, like teach them how to get through this because at the end of the day, the guys who do go and the girls who go and have the best careers, it's coming from within them.
Yep.
It's not because mom and dad are pushing buttons. It's not because of what they see on comparison mode. It's because there's something in them that's allowing them to invest more, to become more resilient. And the reality is, and this is what we learned playing at Northwestern, the more you put in, the harder it is to lose,
Yep.
right? The harder it is to let down your teammates.
Yep.
The more you put in, the harder it is to see yourself not succeed. And so I think if we get back to that on the development side of, yes, great, we have these amazing structures with college and youth, and there's more and more resources, but like ultimately, unorganized, the more a player puts in on their own time, not only the more joy they're going to have in it, but the better development they're gonna realize.
Yep. I agree with that one. I agree. Well, Rich, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. Rich Nasiff, again, guys, for Sprocket Sports, as well as a former assistant coach at Albany and Northwestern and head coach at Division III Benedictine, correct?
You got it. You
There
nailed
you
it.
go.
Thanks, Brooks. I really appreciate it. Love the work that you and Craig are doing. Keep it up, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.